without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Matt Scott. So, Matt Scott, as the Director of Storytelling and Engagement, Matt Scott focuses on passing the mic to those who often go unheard in the climate space. Inspired by human centered design, Matt shapes and implements Project Drawdown strategy for climate solution storytelling and collaborates with team members to shape the contours of the organization's impact storytelling approach. Previously, Matt worked as a global community director and storytelling of the world's largest hackathon, NASA's International Space Apps Challenge, engaging over 100,000 people in over 150 countries. He also has worked with the Australian government, pivotal ventures by Melinda Gates, USAID, the United Nations, Nike, Walmart, and the Obama White House. It's a great privilege to work with Matt. And so, without further ado, take it away, Matt.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Drew, and thank you everyone for having me here. And I just have to say, it's so phenomenal, like seeing folks from all over the world in the chat. I was just taking notes as I was watching from Switzerland, France, Canada, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, the DRC, Spain, Buenos Aires, Ethiopia, the UK, and wherever you're from, all over the world, all over the US, everywhere. Denmark, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate you being here and are just glad that you could join us as we share some more of our work. So, this is the climate narrative using your solution story to spark global change. It's largely about our global solutions diary at Project Drawdown, which I'm thrilled to tell you about. But one thing I'll even ask you to do as we go along is just to be sure off to the side to pull up drawdown.org/diary, which is the resource that I will be talking a bunch about as we go along. But again, I'm Matt Scott. My pronouns are he, him. I'm our Director of Storytelling and Engagement at Project Drawdown. And today I will be talking through a few things when it comes to our broader climate narrative. First is in short, where are we? Where do we want to go? Maybe more important than even where we are is where we want to go. How can we get there? And how you can help get us there. So that will all make so much more sense as I go along. But just as I start out, I'll also encourage folks to drop questions in the Q&A box, and we'll have some time for some of those later on after I present. And so, just as some quick background, again, a quick refresher for folks who may or may not be familiar, Project Drawdown is a global nonprofit climate solutions resource on a mission to stop climate change as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. And at Project Drawdown, we really focus on doing three key things to help accelerate drawdown, to help the world stop climate change, in other words. The first is advancing science-based solutions and strategies. The second is fostering bold climate leadership, working with folks like investors, philanthropists, employees, corporations, and the like. And the third element of our work, where my work on the Drawdown Stories team comes in, is promoting new narratives and new voices. So you'll hear a bit about that third pillar of our work today. In addition to being the director of storytelling and engagement, I lead our Drawdown Stories program, which is where the work that I do is centered in, and you'll hear a bunch more about that today. But the key thing I want to note is that stories are at the heart of what we do on within Drawdown storytelling and engagement work. And that's why, as we start out in the chat, I would like to ask you all to respond to a question. So, in a word or in a few words, how are you taking action on climate change solutions in, for, and with your community? Again, in a word or in a few words, if you're able to sum it up, I'd love if you could drop that in the chat so that I could take a look at that and maybe even shout out some of those as you put your responses in. So I'm seeing, for instance, from Claire, solar, EV, e-bikes. reforesting. I'm seeing planting trees as another thing. There are so many solutions coming fast through the chat, which is amazing to see. And again, just a reminder of the diversity of ways that folks show up in the world. I'm also seeing things like educating our community or engaging our community, educating change makers, storytelling, volunteering in the community, right? Because not all of our climate actions are climate jobs, even though that's a critical part of the solution. So I'm seeing so much come through. Composting is another thing. Again, thank you all for dropping those into the chat. I'll definitely be sure to take a closer look at some of what's coming to mind for you on how you're taking action on climate change solutions in for and with your community. Keep dropping those in. And again, it's so powerful because as hopefully you all know, in part thanks to our work at Project Drawdown, but more broadly, just being part of this climate movement, that there are so many different solutions that we need when it comes to our climate crisis. And to see that so many of you are plugging in different ways is really reassuring. So thank you for doing that. But now I want to ask you a different question that I'd love for you to respond in the chat with. So I'm giving you all just a few more seconds to finish up in the chat with this question. But the second question that I'd love for folks to respond to, again, in a word or a few words, mostly for me to be able to process it as it comes through the chat so quickly. Who or what inspired you to care about climate change and climate solutions? Hillary says that their young son, kids are coming up, third grade teachers, grandchildren, that's a big one. Bill McKibben, nature, the next generation, wildfires, right? Al Gore, attending COP, my love of nature, different politicians and folks are coming up too. Faith is coming up. That's a big one that we see for folks as a motivator. Coworkers, love of nature. Please keep adding those. And again, I'll take a closer look at those as we go along. But I think the reason I start out with these two questions of what you're doing when it comes to the action you're taking, and also who or what inspired you, is because those two questions are at the core of, well, one, at the core of so many of our climate narratives, but they're also at the core of our global solutions diary. Again, I mentioned the website drawdown.org/diary, but today I'm excited to talk through why something like the global solutions diary matters, why we're focused on centering the stories of people who are working on climate action and really not only what they're doing when it comes to climate action, but also why they're doing that work. I'll get into that as we go along. And really, as you'll see here, what I want to start out with is talking about where we are, about our starting point, so to speak. So one person I love to reference just in climate communications work in general is none other than Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, who I'm sure many folks are familiar with. And she's an incredible climate scientist and communicator who is world-renowned for many things, but one of them being this quote, that one of the most important things people can do to address climate change is talk about it. And that might be shocking for folks who haven't heard this before, because so often when we think of climate change and climate solutions, we just think of the science and we think of the scientists. But it's really critical that we talk about climate change and climate solutions, as Catherine shares, and just more insight in what she tends to talk about. She says to focus on communication and connecting with folks, says to connect over personal experiences, and to really focus on building bridges and not walls. So finding commonalities when it comes to the climate crisis and climate solutions and their benefits rather than running directly into arguments. And so it's critical that we talk about climate change, for one, as this example from the Climate Change in the American Mind study shares, that at least in the US, and I know we have audiences from all over the world, but in the US, 66% of Americans say they rarely or never discuss global warming with family and friends, right? That's what we're seeing at this point, and I think a lot of us could relate to that. Many of you probably, like me, have conversations about climate change with other climate advocates, with others who are in this work, but less often are we talking about these things with our families and friends. And that means that we're not picking up the mic. We're not sharing our stories. We're not sharing either the climate action that we're taking in for and with our communities. We're not sharing our stories of who or what engaged us to care about this work. And by not sharing those stories, by not using our voices in that way, we're really missing out on a huge opportunity to engage others when it comes to climate change and climate solutions. Often I've asked people this question, and you might be thinking about this to yourself. What does come to mind when people think of climate change? And there's a study that I'll often reference of 14,000 people who were asked this question. And the vast majority of them think of the outcomes of climate change, the disaster. We see that so often still in many of the responses to that question, that people often think of the disaster when it comes to climate change. Or they'll think of the causes of climate change and pollution. Sometimes folks will think of the polar bears, which I'm always so fascinated by, that people will think of polar bears before they think of other humans or communities, or the communities even that are the most vulnerable or first and worst impacted when it comes to the climate crisis. People will think of folks like Al Gore and other traditional leaders, or think of scientists who, again, are often associated with climate change and climate solutions. And so one thing I like to share is that this is a pattern that we see. Again, people often thinking of the outcomes, of the causes, of the polar bears, of the traditional leaders, of the scientists. Again, all of those are really critical parts of the climate crisis and climate solutions that we need to think about. But the thing that we're not thinking about are the solutions. And the other thing is that the ways that we're communicating aren't motivating action. I love to share this diagram from psychologist and economist Per Espen-Stoknes, who talks about climate news and its impact. And when we just throw the crisis or the statistics and the data, when we just throw the narratives of the global scale, of the industry scale, or even of the corporate scale, oftentimes it leads to a sense of distance, it leads to a sense of doom, a sense of cognitive dissonance, sense and experiences of denial, and also conflicts with identity come up. So, as you could imagine, and maybe as you've experienced too, a lot of the narratives that are out there aren't motivating us to take action. I love the question that I asked earlier and shouted out from the chat of who or what got you engaged, because so many of your responses were really human, or they were based in your experiences, or they were based in being inspired by different voices and folks, which is not what we're getting in the dominant narrative when it comes to the climate crisis, and certainly when it comes to solutions. And so this kind of brings me to this question of, like, where do we want to go? Because we know where we are. We know that we need to change something when it comes to how we communicate about the climate crisis, but where do we want to go? This brings me to another phenomenal person in this climate space who I think of, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who uh, does so much to contribute to this space and contribute to how folks take action or can take action. So some of you might have seen the climate action Venn diagram, which I will come back to a bit more as we go along. But this has largely been popularized by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and it's something that is even represented in many of the stories we tell at Project Drawdown, as I'll share. But one of the quotes that I really appreciate from her experience, again, a perspective that is from the sciences, but also validating the importance of stories, is this one, that we need to have a whole cultural shift where it becomes our culture to take care of the earth. And in order to make this shift, we need storytelling about how the earth takes care of us and how we can take care of her. In other words, we need to shift the narratives from just the crisis, just the problem, just all the things we've been throwing at folks to stories and stories that resonate with folks and help them see their connection to the world that we live in. This brings me to the other half of the research from Per Espen Stoknes, where he talks about the importance of stories and how those motivate action, how those resonate with people. And not just any stories, but stories that are simple. So I talked about how so many of the stories that are out there around climate change or around our environment are at this big picture global scale. And again, those stories are important, but we also need stories of communities and how individuals are bringing communities together, whether that's within organizations, whether that's within whatever interest groups in their communities to be the change their communities need. We need to tell stories that are not overwhelming for folks. We need to tell stories that are social and feature characters that we relate to. So, in one sense, that might be folks with identities that we share. Oftentimes, when I think of the work that we do, I find us sharing stories of a range of folks, but folks who share identities, their family identities, their religious identities, other interests that they have. It's important that we share stories of people from backgrounds that we relate to, and also stories of people that we trust. Even our own stories are really powerful because those resonate with the folks who trust us and look to us most for information, for guidance, and for just for what's popular to do and what should be done when it comes to action. It's important that we tell stories that signal progress when it comes to the science, when it comes to the data, and when it comes to emissions in our atmosphere. That's really important that we tell credible stories. But it's also important that we recognize that the benefits of climate solutions, things like our benefits to our health, to creating jobs, improving our economy, improving safety, improving equity, improving joy in our communities, those are all really important things to center in our stories because oftentimes those are things that people care about even more than just the emissions or even more than just the data. And they're definitely things that people connect to more closely. And so when we tell stories that have all of these qualities, it not only cuts through the noise, but it motivates people, one, to see their connection, to see that they're a lot closer to the problems, but also that they're a lot closer to the solutions and that they have the power to do something when it comes to the solutions. I share this photo of me as a kid, and I'm sure a lot of you could relate. Like stories for us are something that's so human. Some stories for us are something that's so resonant, and they're one of the first things, or some of the first things that we're exposed to. And so consider that and just remember that, like, one, we all have a connection to stories. But as I'll share as we go along, we all have stories. Story can be a daunting word, but it's really something that's within reach for all of us, even quite literally at times. I like to share this statistic that comes from the Futera report on stories to save the world, all about imagining new climate narratives. That, believe it or not, people are 22 times more likely to remember a story than any other form of communication. Just think about that. Like, so often, especially when we want to convince people and get people on board and motivate action, we are sharing uh, the statistics and the data and the facts. And I think what we found is that, well, when we just do that, we're often again hitting up against a brick wall and not getting through to people. So stories are often resonant for people and memorable for people in ways that just the statistics and data alone are not at times. I really admire a Nigerian writer, novelist, just incredible human, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, for how she talks about the power of stories. And one of my favorite quotes is this one, that stories have the power to dispossess and malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. There are big stakes to stories, and I think recognizing that stories have the ability to empower and to humanize, to recognize that stories have the power to, you know, to add to our human dignity, um, really goes beyond just communicating to folks and shows that stories have the ability to build power in many of the communities and perspectives that may have been left out of those stories or overlooked in the single story. And so that brings me to the next question of how can we get there? How can we get to a place where we're tapping into the power of stories, unleashing the power of stories, really, to help folks, one, be seen, but also engage others and move toward a world where we are taking action, where we see our power, and we're unleashing our real world superpowers. I'll say at Project Drawdown, one of the ways that we're doing that is through the Drawdown's Neighborhood Climate Solutions short docuseries, which you could check out at drawdown.org/neighborhood, and which we produce with a couple of collaborators, including our filmmaking team, editing the episodes, Dowd Studio, and also Change Narrative, which provides discussion questions and learning and action resources, which you could find at drawdown.org/neighborhood. I'm so proud to share that to date we've had 55 episodes of Drawdown's Neighborhood. So the very first one featuring Erica Cochran-Hameen in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who you'll see at the top left of the screen, and the latest one featuring Ashia Ajani from the San Francisco Bay Area, which is the latest series that we just released in the last couple of weeks. And I think what's so powerful about all these stories is that each person has their own unique story. Each person has their own unique pathway. Each person has their own unique ways that they're taking action on climate change informed with their communities and why they do that. But also each person has different folks who inspire them or different issues that inspire them to do the work that they're doing. Again, like as much as we highlight these individual stories, something I want to get across is that these stories are by no means exceptional. Each of you who shared in the chat that you have a story of how you're taking action, or that you have a story of who or what inspired you, is just like each of these people, and you have a story that deserves to be highlighted for that reason. I also will point out that with our Drawdowns Neighborhood series, that we often break the paradigm, and I think in sharing our stories in general, we break the paradigm of what we typically do when it comes to climate communication, which is that often we'll just talk about the climate action. We'll just talk about the climate solution alone. But when it comes to storytelling, the ways that we bring in even more folks beyond just talking about the solution or just talking about the action, which is incredibly powerful on its own, is that we'll have folks talk about who they are. I'm sure a lot of you could even resonate with this as you think of some of these questions from the climate action Venn diagram. We share what brings folks joy, or what are their sources of satisfaction and delight. We share what folks are good at, what are their skills, their resources, their networks. This is really a chance to brag on yourself and point out the things that you do the best. And we also share like, what work needs doing, or in other words, what problems each person has seen or felt affected by or confronted in their work. Because when you look to what brings you joy, when you look to your skills and your resources and networks, and when you look to the problems that you want to solve, that's really where you can find the most meaningful action. Stories are an opportunity for us to paint the bigger picture for folks and almost lay out breadcrumbs for others to figure out how to get a place where they find their climate action. One thing I'll also point out is that while there's so many different storytelling resources, one of them that lists out just some of the key qualities of stories is Yale Climate Connections. And they point out that 4 of the qualities that they found through their work and their research that we need in stories are that, for one, we need to tell personal stories. So telling personal human stories is critical. Again, going beyond just the facts and the data and the technology. Telling stories of hope is really important. Again, so often we're just focused on the disaster and the causes rather than on what we can do. And on the brighter future that we actually want to build and can build through unleashing solutions on the world. It's important that we tell diverse stories. That's the third quality that they reveal in some of their work. And that's something that we really focus on within our Drawdown Stories work, not only through Drawdown's neighborhood, but even through this Global Solutions Diary initiative. We're focusing on inviting stories of everyday people from around the world because that mix of stories from all around the world really does have potential to make an impact. And then the fourth quality that they reveal is to tell stories that connect the dots. So helping cut down on that distance that people see between themselves and the solutions. And when we tell stories that connect the dots, it really helps people see how the problems affect them, but also how they could be part of and how their communities could be part of solutions. So one thing I want to underscore, if it's not already clear from what I'm sharing and from the work that we do, it's that everyone has a story. And I'll pause for a second, even just to let that sink in for a second. I hope you could recognize that everyone does have a story. Story can be a daunting word, but I'll reassure you that the story that you share does not need to be something that's polished. It doesn't need to be something that's insanely thought through. Similar to what you shared at the beginning of how you're taking action on climate change solutions informed with your community. And similar to how you shared at the beginning, who or what's inspired you to care, like that is your story and that is part of your story. Which leads me to the other piece of this, which is that you have a story. Again, maybe it's not a story that's widely shared and widely told, but your story is something that could influence others to feel closer to these issues, especially those in your communities, in your neighborhoods, to feel closer to these issues. And your story does have power. And so your story is where you come in, at least as far as today's webinar goes. And so the last piece I want to talk about is how you can help get us there, how you can help get us to a point where people are taking action in their communities, where people are embracing their superpowers, where people are finding not only what gives them joy, what they're good at, and the problems they want to solve, but actual ways of contributing to solutions. So for today, the way that we're asking you and asking folks to share their stories and unlock their stories is as part of the Global Solutions Diary, which is something that you could find at drawdown.org/diary. So again, if you haven't pulled up that site or checked out that site, I would encourage you to. But it's as simple as having a phone or having a webcam and taking a moment to answer a couple of questions that help folks see themselves and help folks see you in addition. So here are just some of the stories. Anastasia from Tanzania, Luca from Tbilisi, Georgia, Amone Wilfred from Kampala, Uganda, Nada from Alexandria, Egypt. And even more stories, though we have dozens and dozens already up on the drawdown.org/diary website, which I'll pull up in a little bit. And again, I think the thing that's so powerful, even for me as a storyteller, is that each of these stories reminds me that for one, I'm not alone, and none of us are alone. There are so many people taking action, and their stories matter. Like all of these folks are, and I'm hoping that some of them are even in attendance today, but all these folks are everyday people who, whether in a volunteer capacity or in their jobs, are taking climate action or advocating and advancing climate action, climate solutions in some way. And so one thing I'll show you before I get to a few examples of Global Solutions Diary videos is that this is what a Global Solutions Diary video looks like. So I'll have this play in the background for a bit. This is a video from Baraka from Tanzania. And you'll see that within the Global Solutions Diary platform, which has the screenshots included here, that all we're really asking is that you answer two questions that most of you answered in the chat earlier. The first one being how and why. Are you taking action on climate change solutions in, for, and with your community? There are also tips for to check out as you submit your story. And then the other question is, who or what inspires or inspired you to care about climate change and climate solutions? So once in the platform, you record your video, again, whether that's on your phone, whether that's on your webcam. Don't worry, you could re-record your video multiple times if you want. We ask that you just make sure to submit your background information of your name, your email, your job title, your company, and what climate solutions are included in your video, just to make it easier for us as we review the videos. And of course, just where you are located. And so one thing I want to show as we go along is just a few of the submissions that we've received so far from all around the world. And there are dozens more that you could check out at drawdown.org/diary. But the first one I want to show is featuring Maria from Argentina. So let's take a look.
Hi everyone, my name is Paz Martinet Riva. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm involved in climate action because I believe it's the intersection of many social, political, economical issues I care about. So I'm currently involved in a project that is trying to bring renewable energy to precarious neighborhoods in the city of Buenos Aires. We're trying to install solar panels with the aim of generating energetical autonomy and replacing informal network connections to the energy network with legal and also high quality solar panels. And we are looking forward to capacitate and inform all the local people in that community, in that neighborhood, on how to manage that energy and how to maintain and keep up the work with those solar panels so they can learn and incorporate those capacities. It is my fellow young climate activists, colleagues who inspire me the most and who show me how they work every day to build a better future for all of us. So, power to the youth.
So that's Maria's story, and just encouragement to raise your volume, just to be sure that you hear all of these clearly on your end. So the next example I want to share is of Vanessa from Nigeria. And again, just to show the range of stories, Vanessa will share their story, but is a 13-year-old doing incredible work. So here is another example from the Global Solutions Diary.
Good day, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kai Valentin. I'm 13 years old from River State, Nigeria. I'm passionate about raising awareness about climate change, environmental degradation, and environmental justice because of the harsh environmental reality faced by the people living in River State, and because nature has been kind to us, so we should reciprocate that love. I spread more awareness about climate change by providing climate education to the younger generation, being Gen Alpha, a project I'm currently working on because I believe that Gen Alpha can still make a change despite their tender age. And also through my arts, such as animations and writing. My animations include Altruistic Environment, Tales of the Roses, Mother Nature and a Pretty Damsel, etc. And also the book titled Amama, which talks about saving the life on land and stopping deforestation. I'm currently on a mission to restore the Garden City of Nigeria with my community by educating them. Port Harcourt, being the Garden City of Nigeria, is not really the Garden City again because of deforestation taking place and other forms of environmental degradation. So I want to restore the Garden City with my community. Also, I'm also spreading awareness through my campaigns online despite facing critics and One time, my friend told me that I'm not living my childhood because I'm being concerned about climate change instead of having fun. But the truth is that nobody's going to enjoy living their childhood if we don't tackle the problem of climate change and restore the earth for future generations. Thank you. Good day, everyone. My name is Vanessa Kai Valentin. I'm 13 years old from River State, Nigeria, and I'm a climate action advocate. What inspired me to take climate actions was when I discovered that in my community, people are suffering from harsh environmental degradations, and we are also harming Mother Nature. I believe that Mother Nature has been kind to us, so we should reciprocate that love.
And one more video I want to share is from Gail Woon from the Bahamas, who has a really powerful story to share.
My name is Gail Woon, and I'm from the Bahamas. I'm a marine biologist and aquaculture specialist. I'm taking action on climate change solutions because I was made homeless 3 times by climate change hurricanes hitting my island. So I feel it very personally. So I am working on a project to restore the mangroves to a community called Water Key, which was a bone fishing destination. So we're engaging with the community there, all of whom were also displaced by climate change Hurricane Dorian in 2019. It is now 2024 and no one has been able to move back yet. They're living on the main island of Grand Bahama. They go on the weekends to try to rebuild their homes, but we're hoping now that when we plant thousands, hundreds of thousands of mangroves in and around that area, that they will still be able to be a bone fishing destination, and that those mangroves will grow at the same time the community will be able to move back to the island. So community engagement is super important for the success of this project, and we're really happy that we've gotten almost all persons from the community involved, and we're doing a planting coming up at the end of this month, at the end of Earth Month. So that's why I'm doing my climate change solutions for my community. My name is Gail Woon, and I'm from the Bahamas. I'm a marine biologist. And so what inspired me to care about climate change and climate solutions? When I was studying oceanography in the late 70s, I learned about what was then called global warming. And I was speaking about climate change and global warming in as early as 1980 on the radio. So this has been an issue that I've been very familiar with for many years. And but more recently, I've been inspired by my Cornell University professor, Dr. Marianne Krasny, and she has, through letting me do the climate change fellowship that she was teaching, as well as some other courses that were to do with climate change and network climate actions. She has inspired me to do as much outreach and community engagement as I can with the knowledge that I have. And so in addition to that, I'm also inspired by Vice President Al Gore. I was able to be trained by him in one of his climate reality leadership training sessions. So I am also a climate reality leader. And I basically, every moment of my waking day, I'm usually talking about climate crisis, climate solutions, and also Project Drawdown. So that is what has inspired me to care about climate change and climate solutions.
Amazing. And I'm just so inspired by Maria, by Gail, by Vanessa, by their stories, and all of the folks who've submitted their stories from all around the world. And so one thing I'll share is, of course, if you want to submit your story, which we would love, because I know we have folks from so many countries, so many different cities, all around the United States, all around the world, is that we want you to submit your story. And so, of course, I've pointed folks to drawdown.org/diary, but one thing we're going to do is actually pull up the website for drawdown.org slash for the Drawdown's Global Solutions Diary. So you could just go to drawdown.org, of course, and under programs, you'll find the Global Solutions Diary, or again, you could go to drawdown.org/diary. So here is the page and where we are. And you'll see when you go to this page that there is a button right there to submit your story or share your story. I'll click on that in a second to show you what that looks like. But I'll also point out that we have a carousel of so many different stories, and we'll keep swapping these out and featuring different stories on here from folks. But here are many of the stories that we've received. And I think the best part, or my favorite part personally of this, is our interactive map of stories from all around the world. So you could see the different pins in different places. I know we had folks from Seattle, different folks in California, all over the United States joining us. But we have all these. I wish I could click on all of them, but there are so many. And again, what's so incredible is to see people taking action, individuals taking action and catalyzing change in their communities where they are. There are also so many other countries and places that we don't yet have featured on the Global Solutions Diary. We would love your submissions, love your communities, your friends, family, colleagues to submit. But I do want to shout out just a bunch of the places where we have submissions so far. There's Argentina, Bangladesh, Benin, Cameroon, Egypt, Georgia, Ghana, India, Iran, Iraq, Ivory Coast, Kenya, Malawi, Nigeria, Pakistan, Rwanda, Sudan, Tajikistan, Tanzania, Uganda, the United States, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and even more. And so it's so incredible where we are already, and yet we're only just getting started and want you to submit your story. So the first thing I'll do is click over to this button that says share your story. And when you click that, you'll see this interface pop up with a little bit more on what to expect. Again, the 2 key questions. And one thing that we'll be doing is by the end of the year, we'll identify a few folks from the submissions to share a few copies of the Drawdown book with, though I always point people to check out drawdown.org/solutions for all of the most up-to-date information on solutions. Also, Vocal Video, the platform we use, has a prize where they select folks to receive that prize. And so you could check that more out on Vocal Video. But what you'll see, again, as you saw on the screenshot, when you pull up each question, is an interface that's just like this. And I won't record my video in here right now, but you can see I clicked on recording a video, and you could hit start recording for your own video. So just to test this out, actually, just to show you what it looks like. I feel a lot of pressure because my video is being recorded right now, as you can see. But just to show you what this looks like, once you finish recording your response, you actually could choose to either redo your video, you could choose to do that, for instance, or you could just choose to move on to the next question, which is about how you're taking, or who or what motivated you to take action and care about climate change and solutions. So it's super easy to use. And there are these tips, which I would absolutely encourage you to read. We ask for folks not to mention or focus on the name of their organization in this submission, because this is really about you, your story, where you're from, what you're seeing, what you're experiencing. And we also have a link to drawdown.org/solutions as a resource. But one thing I want to point out too is that once you submit your story, and make sure to submit the info that we're requesting before logging out, is that you could actually share the Global Solutions Diary with folks by going to the bottom of drawdown.org/diary and clicking send email in order to queue up an auto-populated email with the info that you'll need to share the Global Solutions Diary with folks. And so that's a little bit on just the Global Solutions Diary and what to expect. Again, you saw the website. But 3 things I want to underscore just before we get to a few of your questions is that your story is a gift. By that, I mean, we recognize that it's not always easy to put yourself on camera or to share of yourself, but it's a gift when you do that, because that has the ability to connect with someone else, to connect the dots for someone else, to be the personal story or perspective that they need to be informed or inspired. Your story is unique in that while, of course, you'll have so many things in common with so many other stories from around the world, the power of your story is that you are telling your story, and that you are someone who your friends, who your family, who your colleagues, coworkers, communities trust and look to. And there's a unique power in that, which gets to the last point, that your story is a superpower. So often we wonder what we can do when it comes to climate change and climate solutions. But one of the things you can do, in addition to everything else that we talk about at Project Drawdown, is to share your story. And so as I wrap up and get ready to get to questions, I just want to share some inspiration, especially for folks who might be hesitant, or who might be watching this thinking, oh no, Matt's talking to someone else. Matt wants someone else to submit their story. No, I want you to submit your story if you are someone who's somehow taking action or spreading awareness in your community. And that's actually some inspiration from someone I interviewed a number of years ago, astronaut Katie Coleman, whose work not only focuses on space, but on how we could use lessons from space to inform the work that we do here on Earth. And one thing that Katie shares that's so simple is to keep the mission in mind. So yes, there might be nerves when it comes to sharing our stories and speaking up and what will people think, but keep the mission in mind. Remember that your story has the power to help others find their power. Your story could be the thing that someone needs to see to realize that they can do something, that they can be part of the solution. And also that your story has the power to encourage others to share their stories and serve as a ripple effect to get others on board. So before getting to Q&A, one thing I want to ask you to drop into the chat, which I'll take a look at and that our team will take a look at as it's popping up, is this question of who can your story inspire when it comes to climate change and climate solutions? Maybe it's your friends and family, maybe there are coworkers or colleagues that you work with, maybe there are government officials where you are and other decision makers, but feel free to drop that in the chat. Yes, Seth dropped in neighbors and others, neighbors, colleagues that work with youth, future climate change activists, the next generation. Yes, your story has that power. So one thing we want to invite you to do, again, is to submit your Global Solutions Diary story at drawdown.org/diary. Please keep dropping these into the chat because I love to see what ideas come to mind for folks. And one thing I'll say is that while we're asking folks to submit their stories for the Global Solutions Diary, that a special gift or special recognition or just something that we're doing if you submit your Global Solutions Diary video today, and it's one of the videos that we end up, featuring and publishing in the next few weeks, is that you'll receive a personalized thank you video from me. So that's only an offer for today, that if you submit your Global Solutions Diary video, just so you know how much it matters for you to share your story, I'll also be sending a personalized thank you video to you, which you are more than welcome to share with your communities and with those that you work closely with. But thank you again, everybody. And Drew, I want to invite you back for just a few questions in the time that we still have.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for that amazing presentation. Folks, please just drop, reactions if this presentation deeply resonated with you. Matt did such a phenomenal job sharing the beautiful work that we get to do together at Project Drawdown, and I'm grateful to be a part of. So we just have a couple of minutes left. The questions are flying in, so we'll try to answer as many questions as possible remaining in our time. I wanted to kick off with this question, Matt. It's a question that's commonly asked. What are some of the most common challenges people face when sharing their personal climate stories, and how can they overcome them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one resource I'll point to, because there are probably a bunch, is our Drawdowns neighborhood stories, but specifically there's a story that was shared by Josna Harris, one of our Drawdowns neighborhood change makers and collaborators, who talks about this, which is that our stories could be emotional, they could be challenging to share at times. You see Gail's story, and Gail sharing, literally losing her home, and that's something that is emotional and can be difficult to share. And so the emotions are difficult to navigate. I also found, as Joe Snow talks about in her video for Drawdown's Neighborhood, that imposter syndrome comes up. So people don't think that they should do their story, or they get in the way of sharing their story. And so I would just encourage folks, one, to feel free to take time to process the responses, process your emotions around the questions that are being asked, and recognize, like, yes, climate change is an emotional topic, even though sometimes we do just talk about it in terms of numbers and statistics and the science. It's a human thing, and it's okay to have those emotions and even to bring those emotions to your video. One of the things I love the most is just seeing the joy and the pride and those positive emotions that people have as they're sharing the ways that they are working to combat the challenges we're seeing in the world. And so that's what I see as the biggest challenge. But I definitely believe, like, again, focusing on the mission, it's worth navigating those things in order to ultimately share your story and be sure that your voice, your perspective can be heard. Thanks,
I
Drew,
love
for
that.
that question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sort of speaking more about emotions, as you brought this up, how do you recommend balancing the urgency of the climate crisis with a hopeful tone in storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, what I think for me personally, my hope comes from the work I do leading our storytelling and engagement work, and also just meeting people and being even on webinars like this, where I hear from so many people who are taking action. Not like, none of us as an individual will solve the climate crisis or stop climate change. That's a reality. But what's so amazing, and I hope what gives you hope, because it gives me hope, is that there are so many people out there who aren't sharing their stories, who will never know, who will never hear from, who are working to be part of solutions, or make, bring solutions to life in their communities. That are actually, benefiting people today. Again, creating jobs, improving health, like saving lives in many cases, improving joy. So I would say to really celebrate the ways that today climate solutions are already making an impact. And for me, that really is a huge source of hope.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. A question here about climate storytelling careers. For those of us looking for climate storytelling careers, what were the top 2 or 3 factors that you think helped you reach the job you have now or previous jobs?
The number one thing I would say is just getting started. Like, for me now, one of the things I do in my job so often is interviewing people. But I wasn't in a job the first time that I interviewed someone. I just started to reach out and connect with people to ask them questions. And so I would say that if you want to have a climate storytelling career, like, you could already be a storyteller. You could already build a platform. You could already ask questions or highlight stories, however you want to do that, rather than waiting for someone to hire you to do that. But I think what's also important to know is that storytelling clearly is something that's needed in our world, and Project Drawdown obviously values the role of storytelling. And so I hope that there are opportunities out there that you could also find for careers to center stories. Thank you for that, Drew. I don't know if we have time for like one more question or.
I think maybe two more very quickly.
Okay, great.
Yeah. There was a question here, sort of a general question about recommendations for educators about using the Global Solutions Diary within their classroom. If you had ideas that how that platform could be used to share stories in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one thing I'll always think and say about educators is that they're often able to develop answers to questions like this. And so if you are an educator who already has ideas for what to do with the Global Solutions Diary, feel free to reach out to me and to Drew at stories@drawdown.org. That's our email address. And because I know there are probably already so many great ideas, but you could bake this into assignments. So whether that's having your students take a climate action and then having them film and submit a video, that's one thing they could do. Or they could help someone else who's already taking action in their community submit a video. Those are just some of the ideas off the top of my head. But one thing I know very well, especially as the son of a mom who, is and was an educator, is that educators are so great at coming up with ideas around this. And I'm excited to hear ideas that come to mind for folks on how to engage your students or communities. But maybe the bigger lesson is feel free to share this. Like share this after you submit your story, share this with your community, share this with others so that they could be part of it. I think the beauty of this is that this could be a conversation starter within your classrooms and within your communities. And we always take feedback and ideas on other ways and other resources we could add around this to help you make the most of the Global Solutions Diary. Thank you for asking that, Drew.
Yeah, wonderful. And yeah, as Matt said, please reach out. Stories@drawdown.org is the best place to reach us. Unfortunately, we're getting close to time. We're a minute over time, and we really want to respect everyone and their capacity and today. And so just one last question. What's one thing you want people to walk away with who attended or are watching this webinar?
I think the biggest thing is I want them to walk away knowing that with each and every person, like I am talking to you as I share this. So often, I'm sure many folks don't think that they have a story that's worthy of sharing or action that's worthy of sharing. But I want you to know that your story is something that's worthwhile. Your story is something that could inspire folks and inform folks. And so, yeah, please submit your story to the Global Solutions Diary. I'm at the very least excited to be inspired by it, but also excited for all of the other folks who will see your story, whether that's because you share it with them once it's published or because they go to the interactive map and find your story there. Like never underestimate the power of your story. And again, feel free to submit it at drawdown.org/diary.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating, being an engaged audience, and being a part of this conversation with us today. Thank you to Matt Scott for this phenomenal presentation as well. We feel really lucky we get to share the work that we're doing and opportunities to get involved in it. And thank you for being willing to learn more about climate storytelling and solutions today. We'll send out a recording of today's webinar in a couple of days. I invite you to sign up for Project Drawdown's newsletter if you haven't yet, and to follow us on your favorite social media platform for future webinars and events and programming and activities that we're working on. So thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful, joyful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.